The fluorescent lights flickered above the cramped gym, throwing harsh shadows on the scuffed mats below. The air was thick with sweat and tension. Jaden stood at the edge of the room, fingers tightening around the collar of his GI. At 19, he wasn't the oldest here, but tonight, he was the most scrutinized. Two men in suits leaned casually against the wall, clipboards in hand, their eyes scanning every move. Their presence was like a silent judge's hammer waiting to fall. "Is he really ready?" one whispered to the other, barely audible. The room was mostly silent, except for the faint shuffle of feet and the low hum of conversation. A few seasoned students eyed Jaden with thinly veiled skepticism, their stares sharp as knives. Coach's voice cut through the tension. "Jaden, step forward." Jaden inhaled deeply, swallowing the knot in his throat. He knew what this was. A test, not just of skill, but of worth. The two men stepped forward, their eyes cold and calculating. "Mr. Jackson," the taller one said, voice clipped and formal, "we've heard rumors about your ability, about your legitimacy in this lineage." Jaden's jaw tightened. The shorter man smirked. "We need proof, a demonstration. Show us you deserve to be here." A few students chuckled. The unspoken words hung in the air. "Watch the kid fall." Jaden's gaze swept the room, eyes locked on his, some doubtful, some curious. He stepped to the center of the mat. Seconds later, his opponent, a taller, confident brown belt, stepped up, smirking. "Ready to get schooled, kid?" The brown belt taunted, cracking his knuckles. Jaden didn't reply. He knew words wouldn't help. The referee, coach himself, nodded once. "Begin." Time slowed. Jaden moved with purpose, calm, precise, like a predator sizing his prey. The first clash was quick. Jaden dodged an aggressive sweep and countered with a swift grip on the opponent's GI. The brown belt tried to shake him off, but Jaden held tight. The crowd's murmurs shifted, from derision to uncertainty. Then with a fluid movement, Jaden executed a flawless armbar, a move that took barely 14 seconds from start to finish. The opponent tapped out. The room went silent. The two men with clipboards exchanged a glance. Jaden stood, breathing steady, eyes steady. He had just earned more than a submission. He had earned respect. Jaden folded his GI with practiced hands, the edges neat, the fabric worn but cared for. The gym was small, not flashy, scuffed mats, peeling paint, and faded posters of legendary fighters lining the walls. But it was home. He didn't talk much, never had. His presence spoke louder than words. The other students knew him as steady, unshakable, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, but when he moved, it was with intention. No wasted energy, no empty bravado. On the mat, Jaden was patient, waiting, watching, finding the openings others missed. Outside the gym, he worked two jobs, helping his mom with bills and making sure his younger sister had what she needed. His life was layered, balanced on responsibilities that weighed heavier than his frame. He trained because it gave him control over a world that often seemed unfair. His coaches respected him, not because he was the loudest or fastest, but because he showed up every day, never made excuses, and faced every challenge head-on. Jaden's eyes had a quiet fire, not the flashy kind that screams for attention, the kind that burns steady, ready for anything. He was the kind of kid who carried his own weight, and then some. That night, as the gym settled after the clash, he didn't celebrate. He simply prepared. Because Jaden knew the path wasn't about one moment of victory. It was about every moment after. The gym's door creaked open again, pulling Jaden's attention from his quiet focus. Two more figures entered. This time, a woman and a man in crisp business attire, faces carefully composed but eyes scanning like predators. They carried folders and badges that gleamed under the harsh lights. One of the men with clipboards nodded toward them. "The Federation representatives," someone muttered nearby. The woman stepped forward, her voice smooth and controlled. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Mills, Regional Compliance Officer for the National Jiu-Jitsu Federation." Her companion introduced himself as Mark Daniels, Technical Supervisor. They exchanged polite nods but gave nothing away. Jaden felt a chill. These weren't local coaches or supportive officials. They were bureaucrats sent to assess, question, and most likely to discredit. Karen unfolded a sheet of paper and read with an unsettling calm. There have been concerns raised about the qualifications of some practitioners here, specifically about Mr. Jackson's recent demonstrations. Jaden's eyes narrowed. The concerns were vague, but the implication clear. Mark stepped in, voice clipped and measured. The Federation requires strict adherence to standards. Certifications must be verified. Any anomaly risks suspension of the entire school's license. The words hung heavy, more threat than protocol. Karen flipped through her folder, producing a printed dossier. According to our records, Mr. Jackson's credentials are incomplete. There is no verifiable proof of rank. Jaden's lips pressed into a thin line. The dossier was wrong, or worse, falsified. He wanted to speak, to challenge them, but their tone left no room for debate. We will be conducting a formal review, Karen continued, including direct observation. Today's demonstration was noted, but insufficient. The man with the clipboard whispered, "We have to be certain. The integrity of the art depends on it." Jaden caught the glances exchanged, calculated, rehearsed, like a script performed too often. Some students exchanged uneasy looks. Others masked their discomfort with forced nods. Karen smiled thinly. "We encourage full cooperation. This is for the good of the academy and the community." But the smile never reached her eyes. Jaden felt the weight of it all, not just the accusations, but the cold machinery of control moving against him. It wasn't about fairness, it was about power. The gym's atmosphere shifted. What had been a place of growth was now a stage for something far darker, and Jaden was in the center. Jaden met Karen's cold smile with steady eyes, refusing to shrink under the weight of their thinly veiled accusations. He folded his arms calmly, voice low but firm. "If you want proof of my rank, I'm ready to show it." Whenever you say, the room held its breath. Mark Daniels flipped through Jaden's paperwork again, as if searching for something to exploit, but found nothing that could be twisted. Karen's gaze sharpened. The Federation requires documented lineage, verified by certified black belts. You do not provide that. Jaden shook his head slowly. "My coach is here," he said, nodding toward the man by the mats. "He's authorized to vouch for me." Coach stepped forward, his face unreadable, but voice steady. "Jaden has trained under me for 5 years. I awarded him his brown belt last year, and the black belt is a matter of when, not if." Karen's eyes flickered to Coach, then back to Jaden. "Documentation must accompany such claims." Coach's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Jaden noticed a few students watching quietly from the edges. There was quiet support, subtle nods, clenched fists under the table. The tension in the room was tight, like a held breath. Jaden took a slow step forward. "I don't need papers to prove what I can do. Let me demonstrate again. Let me earn it with my skill." Karen's smile twitched, clearly unprepared for this. "Very well," she said, voice cool but with a trace of unease. "One more demonstration, but we expect it to meet Federation standards." Jaden nodded once. The gym cleared a space. The brown belt opponent from earlier stood ready again, his earlier smirk replaced by something more cautious. Jaden's movements were deliberate. No wasted energy, no theatrics. He let the opponent advance first, then countered smoothly, leveraging balance, speed, and precision. Within seconds, Jaden executed a flawless throw, quickly followed by a submission hold that left the opponent no choice but to tap. 14 seconds. The room exploded in whispers and stunned silence. The officials exchanged tense looks. Karen's voice was flat. "Impressive, but skill alone doesn't meet our criteria." Jaden's calm voice cut through. "Skill is the only true proof. Everything else is just paper." Mark opened his mouth, but Coach stepped forward. "This gym stands by its students. Jaden earned that demonstration through years of discipline." The room's atmosphere shifted. Quiet confidence replaced doubt. A younger student watching from the back stepped closer, eyes bright. "I've seen Jaden train every day. He's the real deal." Karen's smile thinned. "We will review all evidence." Jaden didn't flinch. He'd planted a seed, a subtle challenge. The power had shifted, not by shouting, but by unshakable presence. The tension didn't vanish, but it had changed shape. Now they had to face him on his terms. Days passed. The gym felt heavier now, like the air itself was waiting, watching. Jaden kept training, but his mind was tangled in the web of suspicion the officials had spun. Karen and Mark returned, this time with documents, reports, and questions aimed to dismantle everything Jaden had built. They started quietly, polite at first. "Mr. Jackson, can you explain the gaps in your certification records?" Karen asked during a meeting with Coach and Jaden. Jaden glanced at Coach. "No answer there." "I've trained at this academy for years," Jaden said carefully. "My progress has been measured on the mats, not in paperwork." Mark's pen tapped aggressively. "That's not how the Federation operates. Without proper documentation, rank claims are invalid." Coach finally spoke, voice low but firm. "We've operated under the guidance of a respected mentor who's currently unreachable. His paperwork is delayed." Karen's eyes narrowed. Delayed paperwork is not a valid excuse for missing lineage verification. Her tone was sharp now, exposing impatience beneath the polished surface. Jaden watched her carefully. Every word, every glance. Small cracks began to show. Later in private, Mark's confidence wavered. "I don't like this," he muttered, thumbing through a folder. "There's something off about these records." Karen dismissed the concern with a cool laugh. "We can't let sentiment cloud protocol." But during their second observation at the gym, things started to unravel. Karen watched Jaden spar with another student. His technique was flawless, fluid, undeniable. One of the younger students approached her quietly. "Coach always says Jaden's got the heart of a black belt, even if the papers aren't done yet." Karen's eyes flicked to Mark, who gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. That evening, the officials confronted Coach directly. "There are inconsistencies in the Academy's registered certifications," Karen said sharply, "and some of your staff have questionable credentials." Coach's face hardened. "We run a tight ship. Our students earn their ranks honestly." Karen's voice dropped an octave. "Honesty isn't enough. Federation rules are clear." Mark's voice, usually steady, cracked slightly. "We're discovering more than just paperwork issues. Some names don't check out in the registry." Coach took a step forward. "Enough. You're disrupting the academy without evidence. This is harassment." The tension exploded, but Jaden's calm presence cut through the chaos. He stepped forward. "If you want truth, look at the mats. I don't need papers to prove what I am." Karen's smile flickered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. Mark avoided Jaden's gaze. The room was silent for a moment. Then Karen spoke, quieter this time. "Perhaps we need to reconsider." That night after they left, Coach pulled Jaden aside. "They're grasping at shadows," he said, voice low. "But it's not over." Jaden nodded. He knew the fight wasn't just about belts or titles. It was about something deeper: respect, recognition, truth. The next morning, the gym was quieter than usual. The usual chatter and clatter of training replaced by a tense stillness. Jaden felt it the moment the black SUVs pulled up outside. Two officers in crisp uniforms stepped inside, badges catching the fluorescent light. Their presence was calm but unmistakably authoritative. Detective Ramirez introduced herself with a steady voice. "We're here to investigate allegations related to the Academy's certification practices." Karen and Mark were already present, their confident facades slipping slightly under the scrutiny. Ramirez turned to Coach first. "Sir, can you provide your documentation and credentials?" Coach handed over his files without hesitation. There was no doubt in his eyes, only quiet dignity. The detective flipped through the paperwork, noting signatures, dates, and verifications from trusted figures in the martial arts community. Karen attempted to interject. "We have reason to believe some of these are falsified." Ramirez held up a hand. "We'll determine that ourselves." Mark shifted uneasily. Jaden stood beside Coach, feeling the weight of years of training distilled into these moments. Ramirez looked directly at Jaden. "And you, young man, your skills have been witnessed and recorded. What do you have to say?" Jaden met her gaze steadily. "I trained to be better than yesterday. Everything else is noise." Ramirez nodded approvingly. Then came the phone call. A senior official confirmed that Karen and Mark's credentials were under review for misconduct and falsification. The officer's tone shifted. We're here not just for investigation, but to detain those involved in fraudulent practices. Karen's eyes darted, calculating escape. Mark's face went pale. Within minutes, officers stepped forward to escort the pair out in handcuffs. The room's atmosphere shifted again, this time with a sense of closure, not tension. Ramirez turned to the gathered students and coaches. This academy operates under the law. Any attempt to undermine it will be met with action. Jaden's friends exchanged looks, relief, respect, something like hope. Coach placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder. You stood your ground. Jaden nodded. It's not just about me, it's about all of us. As the officers led the corrupt officials away, the gym began to breathe again. The shadows that had lingered started to fade, but Jaden knew the fight for respect was ongoing. For now, justice had its moment. In the quiet that followed the arrests, the gym's energy shifted, not with celebration, but with sober reflection. Coach gathered the students for a talk. This isn't just about Jaden, he said, voice steady. What happened here is part of a larger problem. He spoke of the rise in fake credentials, the flood of self-proclaimed experts, and the pressure on legitimate schools to prove their worth in a world obsessed with titles and status. Jaden listened. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom. Karen and Mark were just the surface, symbols of a system that too often valued paperwork over passion, rules over reality. The Federation's failure to verify credentials properly had opened the door for corruption, mistrust, and harm. Coach looked around the room. Many of you will face doubt in your journeys. People who question your skill, your dedication, even your identity. Jaden caught the eyes of his teammates. It's a reminder, Coach continued, that respect isn't given. It's earned every day, through honesty, discipline, and perseverance. Outside the gym, stories of similar struggles echoed in other communities. Schools shut down by false accusations, students lost in bureaucratic battles, authentic fighters pushed to the margins. Jaden's experience wasn't unique, but it was a beacon. It showed how truth, no matter how suppressed, can surface, and how courage, even quiet courage, can challenge systems built on pretense. He thought about the weight he carried, not just as a young black man in a sport where he was sometimes the only one in the room, but as someone who had to fight twice as hard for recognition. The stakes were bigger than belts or ranks. They were about identity, dignity, and justice. Jaden understood now that the fight outside the mats, the fight against false authority, bias, and corruption, was just as important as the one inside. And winning that fight required more than skill. It required steadfastness, patience, and the strength to stand when the world tried to knock you down. Weeks later, the gym was back to its rhythm. Jaden moved through the space with quiet confidence, not because of titles or recognition, but because of something deeper. He was just a young man who loved the art, the discipline, and the clarity the mats gave him. The noise of accusations and fake authority had faded into memory, replaced by the steady sound of breath, the soft thud of feet, the practiced clash of bodies moving in sync. Friends approached him differently now with a new respect, not loud or flashy, but real and earned. Jaden helped a younger student with a technique, patient and focused. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. His skill spoke for itself. One afternoon, Coach pulled him aside. Jaden, he said quietly, you handled everything with a level head. That kind of strength isn't on any certificate. Jaden nodded. It was never about proving them wrong. It was about standing for the truth. Coach smiled softly. Exactly. That night, Jaden sat alone in his room, looking at the worn GI folded neatly on his bed. He thought about everything, the struggle, the tension, the victory. He realized the battle had never been about a belt or a rank. It was about respect. And respect wasn't granted by others. It was earned in silence, in perseverance, and in the courage to stand firm when challenged. Jaden whispered to himself, a simple truth he wanted to carry forward. True strength is not in the title you hold, but in the truth you live every day.